The big difference is the environment we exist in. Years ago, it was an analog paper environment, and today we're dealing with a paperless digital environment. Before you had a paper file, it was handed to you, may have come from a few places. Now, electronically stored information can come from a multitude of locations. You might have servers in different parts of the country. There's all these different areas you have to think about where this information is stored. And then you have to look and consider, well, how is it stored? Is it emails? Is it PowerPoints? Is it Word documents? Is it something on the database? But another big factor is something called metadata, and that's the data associated with the electronic files. Well, let's take a Word document, for example. Looking at the metadata, you could tell when the date was created or who authored it. Take an email. Were there blind copies? Who did it go to? When was it opened? An Excel spreadsheet. You get a paper copy of it, but then you have the electronic version, you could see that you didn't receive all the columns. Another common example would be photographs. Photographs come in TIFF images and JPEG images, but if you looked at one of those files, you could see, for example, when the photograph was taken. Under the federal rules, as well as most of the state rules now, there is an affirmative duty by both the client or litigant and the law firm to identify, collect, preserve, and produce electronically stored information. This is a dual responsibility. So counsel, for example, needs to oversee and marshal that these things are taking place. And in terms of the company, they need to ensure that they're preserving the information. The best practice is to issue a litigation hold notice. And that notice will go to the key custodians or the IT department for the company that has to identify, preserve, and collect its ESI. And that can either be issued by in-house counsel, or it can be issued by a person within the company, or at times it can be issued by the law firm. And when one talks about ESI, it's the software or data. So that could be a Word file, an Excel file, a PowerPoint. The other item to remember is that you also have ESI on databases. The third thing to point out is that with regard to ESI, it's where does it reside? It could be on a server, it could be on a workstation, even today, it could be on an iPad. And then one of the interesting things coming up today is the iCloud or remote storage. That's another issue to grapple with in terms of how to obtain that information. There's a cost associated with electronic discovery, and you need to be aware of alternatives that you can use to keep those costs down. Just as important, if you, for example, go to a scheduling conference and the judge asks how much data you have, how does your client store that data, are there going to be any issues for producing that data, you really need to be on top of that. Because the worst thing you can say is, Your Honor, no problem, we'll get that to you, but unbeknownst to you, you have hundreds of gigabytes of data that needs to be produced, and there's going to be a costly result to that.